Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of A Happy Moment. My name is Dan. I'm glad to have all of you with me today. Today, I do have a very special guest. He is the author of the Diamond Dragons series, but he also has 30 years' experience in production, including acting, writing, directing, singing, sound design, fight choreography, saber fencing, instruction, video editing, voiceovers, electronic props, and more. Please welcome Matthew Carauddo. Hey, Matthew, welcome.
Hey Dan, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And when you list them off like that, it makes it sound a little much, obviously, but it's true. Like those are the, those are the things that I've been doing over these 3+ decades and whatnot. And so yeah, thanks for having me aboard the show, and I appreciate it.
That's awesome. I'm glad to have you with me today. Well, Matthew, let me ask you first of all, with all these different things that you've been involved in, have you always been motivated to go after all these things that you have an interest in, or did someone kind of have to nudge you into it at first?
It's a really good question. I would say that me personally, I've always been pretty much the driving force behind myself. In other words, I really didn't exactly have a situation where I had tons of strong mentors who were like, Matthew, we believe in you. You're got to do this, and I'm going to tell you. I tell you how to do it. I tell you when to do it. I tell you why to do it. I tell you how to do it. You're going to be a rich man. None of that thing was going to happen to me. So essentially, whenever it was that I wanted to do a project, I was the one who was like, if I'm going to get this done, it's basically going to be up to me. And that started fairly early, like going all the way back to well, I won't go as far as like middle school. I think that'd be too much for people. When I was born, it was this, that, and the other. No. But like if I kind of just briefly mention high school, it's like I had several ideas that I wanted to do X and Y and Z, and then all I did is pitch them to the theater production instructors and kind of crew that were there, and obviously they were the ones who were going to say whether you could do it or not. But because I had been there, and they realized I was serious about what it was that I was doing, most of the time I was not met with adversity from them. But it wasn't like they were going to say, okay, and now we will do everything for you. They were like, okay, go on with your bad self and get it done. Like, what? Show me something. And I'm like, oh yeah, no problem. And so, like, for example, one of the projects that I did in high school that I particularly enjoyed, and actually it was, a relatively large thing for my high school, everybody enjoyed it, was I decided, hey, I want to direct several scenes from The Princess Bride, of course, live on stage. And so I remember when I proposed that, this was the first time my instructors were like, what the? No, absolutely not. I'm like, will you just wait? Just wait until I actually pitch it to you before you say no. And sure enough, I'm fast forwarding here. They allowed it, and I recruited our athletic director to play Vicini, and part of it was he was so excited about. He was not short too; he was a super tall guy, but I still remember David Ashard was his name, David Ashard, and he had taken some acting classes in the past, so he was just like, oh yeah, Matthew, I would love to do that. I think it would be a lot of fun. It will take some stress off of you too, because you can obviously trust me. I'm going to go for it. I'm familiar with it. I love the film. I'm like, great. So we had that, and I got one of the loveliest gals in the school who was also an actress to play or portray Princess Buttercup. And I got an old friend of mine who his name was also David, but David Bender, who had graduated already, but he had experience in fencing. So I said, David, if I could get you to be Inigo Montoya, that would be great, and stuff. And at first he was like, I don't really like the idea of going back. I'm like, you're not going back to high school. You're in a performance, and it's going to be great. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to do some swordplay. It's going to be crazy. I'm going to do some backflips, and you could do we could do some stuff. Because he could also do acrobatics, which we both trained in with the dance and acrobatics, and generally the movement instructor there. Her name was Fran Atlas, and she had her own school of dance and movement and whatnot, in which they also taught, in addition to ballet and jazz and funk and pop and all that, some levels of acrobatics. So we were able to incorporate a whole lot into the production. So that was a lot of fun, and that sort of kicked off my kind of baptism by fire, if you will, in the idea of directing, acting, choreographing fight work, and then just coordinating all of these moving objects. So that kind of process is laborious, and it takes a lot of planning and discipline, consistency, commitment. You know.
Is the Princess Bride what first got you interested in fencing?
I wouldn't say that was directly the only thing, but it certainly was I mean, I already used the term the baptism by fire. It certainly was the most, um, uh, uh, I dug in the most. I had to, right? I was like, I don't want to look like a chump. I need to do some actions where it looks like we're trying to kill each other, but it's still staged combat where it's safe and whatnot. And by the way, just to kind of transition to other things, is a lot of people don't realize is the choreographer on The Princess Bride was none other than a fellow named Bob Anderson. And Bob Anderson was extremely famous back in the day, not only because he was a champion fencer, of all things, no joke, but he had choreographed things like Rob Roy, obviously The Princess Bride. He did some of the choreography for The Empire Strikes Back, and he portrayed the fighting Vader in Empire Strikes Back. And I'm pretty sure Return of the Jedi sort of sharing that position with a fellow named Peter Diamond. Really cool name, by the way, Peter Diamond, who was he was actually in Doctor Who a little bit, but he was also in some of Lucas's other performances. But Peter Diamond was also a big choreographer. Peter Diamond also was known as being Fazil in what's the word? There can be only one. What was that? It's Highlander.
Highlander.
Yeah, he was Fazil. He's the first swordsman that you see in the suit and tie and the sunglasses in the parking lot, right? And so then I forgot, Christopher Lambert comes in. Fazil, what are you doing here? In his Christopher Lambert way. But anyway, that is Peter Diamond, believe it or not. Some people don't know that. But anyway, so like it sort of sparked my I want to take this more seriously. I want to take some legitimate fencing classes and whatnot because I hadn't at that point. There was no, I didn't know of anything of it. So when I went to college, I started getting more involved, and then after college, I actually went to a academy of fencing and studied under the maestro of the academy, is what it's called, the master of the academy. And then eventually, he kind of came up to me and said, you work really well with kids and the adults, and everybody loves you here, and you work really hard, and you're always here. Did you ever think about being an instructor? And I was like, hey, you're the barber. I mean, I don't know if I ever thought of that, but I'll consider it. And then fast forward, and I decided, okay, I will take this on and try to become a more official fencing instructor and whatnot. And so, that's a long rabbit hole, and I don't want to go on too much more about that. But I went down that path and competed for many years. I had my share of golds and silvers and bronzes, nothing Olympic and nothing super fancy. Like, I was a good fencer. I was not, dun dun dun, nor was I just like really awful or anything like that. It would be hard to get medals, I suppose, if you were terrible. But so yeah, that was part of it. But my sort of raison d'etre, if you will, was pretty much always like storytelling, using drama and characters and their relationships and people's desires being in conflict to one another to teach you lessons and make you feel something, like what did you feel when you finished watching Lord of the Rings? Whichever version of it. What did you feel when you finished reading, if you did, Lord of the Rings, and so on and so forth? I always resonated with that, and so that's what I tended to continue moving through.
Very cool. Matthew, if we can, I'd like to spend some time talking about Diamond Dragons.
Sure.
So you've published 4 books so far. Book 4 just came out in December over the winter solstice. Did you always plan on writing a fantasy series, or were you considering anything else?
Also a good question. The best way to say it with the Dragons series was that I suppose since I've always enjoyed fantasy and also things like video games, books, movies, whatever, it was always maybe in the back of my mind, but it really didn't really hit me super hard until somewhere around, I don't know, 2015 or 16, when I was like, maybe I should really tackle this screenplay thing. I want to try and see if I can write a competent screenplay about dragons. But what the whole time was going on was I was like, but I want to make sure that if I'm going to do this, I want to have a story. I don't want to just say, okay, I'm just going to do it and I don't care. That's, to me, that's a terrible way to approach the idea of writing. If you don't have a really competent story and you just say, I have a cool idea. And I'm like, I don't know, like, will your idea be the legs that will carry it all the way through it being a 2 hour experience or a book or whatever? So what literally kind of happened was just one day, I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I had this sort of epiphany of like, oh, this would be a really cool ending if I had this one hero kind of character and this thing and the villain. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to write that down and I'm going to pocket it. And that kind of was there for a year or something. I didn't really touch it. But then eventually I got to the point where I said, I got some ideas now for some characters. Like they just kept popping up left and right. I don't know where they were coming from too, Dan. Like, not exactly. It's sort of like personalities, and then I was like, oh, we could have a dragon with this and he would be the one that does this. And then this gal, she's going to be like this. Interesting. Interesting. So then I had a cast of characters file, if you will. And, that was starting to grow. And I started being like, oh, what if I made it where their personalities and their colors sort of were like, again, diamonds, emeralds, rubies, and so on. I'm like, I don't want to go too deep into that and make it like way too in your face. But I'm like, that's a good idea of how we can subtly get people's emotions to be in one direction or another. And then it just sort of started to happen where I was like, okay, I think I have the competent ending. So I wrote the ending first, and you'll see where I'm going with this in a minute. And then I started at the beginning and said, okay, now how do I connect the dots? How do I bring those two things together? And that's how I approach, or how I've always approached almost everything, Dan. If I don't have the ending for something, I almost never want to approach it. And I don't mean that it needs to be absolutely exactly every single word and every little detail. That's not what I mean. I'm just saying is you need that powerful ending. Like, what is the kicker on this that makes it like, oh yeah, that's going to make the audience be like, this is wonderful. Or the readers, saying, wow, what a wonderful, story. So, that's how I approach it. Not to mention the fact that I feel that if you have the ending in mind, now when you're writing, your characters are headed that direction, or at least you can be aware of it. If you don't have your ending set up in the first place, your characters can wander very, very easily. And I have seen this with a lot of these different groups that I'll be popping onto every now and again on whatever social media groups. You'll see someone say, oh guys, I'm having this trouble, maybe you guys can help me. I'm writing and I've been doing this and da-da-da-da, but now I just feel like I don't know where I am and they don't this and they're wandering in this and I've written 30,000 words and I don't know what the I'm doing. And sometimes I'll be like, do you know your end? And they'll be like, wait, what are you talking about? I'm like, do you know the ending to your story? And they're like, of course not. Why would I know that? Da-da-da. And I'm like, I don't want to pull a Mythbusters on you and be like, well, there's your problem, and be like, and then I try to explain it to them a little bit. Sometimes they're receptive and they take it for what it is, and then they can go on and do what they like with it, whether they accept it or not. And other ones, they're kind of like, huh, interesting or whatever, like they have their different ways of looking at it. But I feel that's a pretty strong bit of advice for folks out there, if they're not that I'm being asked that necessarily right now, but I feel like if you do know the ending, it's kind of like, if you're playing football, you know what your job is. You can see
Right.
the end zone, you've got the ball, you don't have the ball, you're doing this, they count it out for you how many yards. Imagine football with no labels on the field. You'd be like, people say, how many yards are we left? I'm like, I don't know. No idea. So, I mean, it's like, for me, it's fairly obvious that you're like, I need to know the end before I start, to a point, not to be pedantic and awful about it, but it's like, I feel like that's a strong way to approach storytelling and almost any project. I mean, when you get in your car, Dan, do you know where you're going?
Usually.
Right? Unless you're taking a joyride, we'll rule those out. But right, you usually
Okay.
going, hey, I gotta go to the dentist, I gotta go to work, gotta take the kids to school, whatever, you know what I mean? So it's sort of like it's a good idea, and that way, when you're writing, you can tell if you're like, oh, this scene, we're not going anywhere. Like, this is cute and all, but how does this progress the plot? It doesn't. Maybe I shouldn't include it. And so that's how I sometimes do it. I will write a bullet point and be like, okay, what if Jackie and Dupre, okay, and they have the meeting, and I'll file that away. And then sometimes I'll come back to it and I'll be like, oh, that is terrible. I'm so glad I didn't write that. It's a terrible idea. So this, by the way, happens a lot, just in case people think, oh, I bet he thinks everything that he writes is great. I'm like, no, no, not at all. There's often times where I mean, a good way of thinking of it is this too, Dan, is I'll have 12 ideas. I only used the one. The other 11, not so good. Or put it this way, is even if I don't want to make it a negative thing, we don't necessarily say that idea 1 was great and the other 11 were garbage. Sometimes it's just like you choose the best of all the ideas. Maybe it's a toss-up between first place and second place. It goes back to even an analogy with the fencing. When I used to win a gold or win a silver, I mean, we were both fencing pretty well if one of us defeated the other. I mean, it's not to say that, ha, the gold medalist, here they are, and silver, you trash, get into the dumpster with you. It's like, come on, everybody's at a certain, place, but sometimes you win gold and sometimes silver. So what I'm trying to do is, because you have the control over that, I want to take the gold medal scenes and push those forward. And I'm not perfect. Some of my scenes I'll look back at and we're like, I probably could have done that a little bit more powerful if I had only had this and that. Oh, well, what are you going to do? But when you've written it and you're like, I believe in this scene, I believe in the characters, the relationship, the things in the event that happen, good. That's really important. But it is also important to cut when you're like, oh, that's not my best writing. So cut it, or don't write it in the first place. Right.
Yeah, I think all that makes a lot of sense. Now, would you like to give us a brief synopsis of what the series is about?
Well, I feel like the best way would be, instead of me, yabbering on about the synopses about all 4 of the books thus far as of the time of this recording, and I am, by the way, still working on Diamond Dragons 5 and 6 and so on, and those will come out in 2025 and 2026 and whatnot. The best way would be for people to visit the website, which is diamond-dragons.com. And there's just a plethora, if you will, of information there. People can download a free PDF. That's sort of the rough version of the first 9 chapters, I want to say, of Diamond Dragons 1. So they can kind of get a feel, even if it's just the rough version. It's not my professional version of it. There's also, I made a pre-visualization set of videos, if you will. They're extremely rough, but they've got like original music that I'm proud to say that I not only helped compose and create, but worked with a composer to make these beautiful themes and wonderful stuff like that. Or in some cases, I was able to commission certain pieces of music where I'm like, oh, it's beautiful, this is perfect, I'm going to contact these guys. One group I might as well shout out to, 12 Titans Music. They had several themes. Another guy, his name is David Cseplo, not to be confused with Dave Chappelle, the comedian, but David Chappelle does this wonderful music. I want to say he's from the UK, but I'm not exactly sure. But the point being is, a substantial amount of work has gone into me producing these projects. They're way more than just books, way more. And I'm not trying to make it sound like, oh, he's being pretentious with himself and da-da. I'm like, just go look at the website for yourself and you'll see. I mean, in books 1 through 4, which is approximately 600,000 words, altogether, there are 350 plus beautiful illustrations. And this is all non-AI. I feel I must now add that into the interviews that I do, since it's all now become a thing ever since 2020, 2021, if you will. I don't do any of that stuff. I do everything myself for the most part. I sometimes have the ability to hire folks to do illustrations of stuff. I love doing that, bringing aboard an artist or two. Oh, I got this great idea. Here's all the concept ideas, and here's all my text on the descriptions of this dragon or this thing. Will you help me out? Let's show me something, let's see what we can come up with. I will pay you. It's going to be great. We'll have fun. But obviously I cannot do that for all 350 of them. I'd be broke, So that's the best way for people to say, well, what is Diamond Dragons? What is Armageddon's Ballad? What is this whole, hexology, if you will, 6 books, the hexology? What is the hexology going to be? What are the first 4 books about? And what's going on with each individual story? Diamond-Dragons.com is the best place, and they can literally just kind of see all of it. There's even teaser videos for each one of them. You can think of them like trailers, but certainly not on a whatever you want to call it, multi-million-dollar production level. I can't do that. I'm alone. It's just me. So and that's another thing. If people want to email me ever, I don't know why they'd want to do that. But if they were like, oh, I want to contact this guy, it's just me. They're not going to get a team of wizards and elves and dwarves or whatever. It's just me over here.
And are you actively pitching this as a screenplay?
When you say pitching, clarify?
Have you submitted it anywhere?
Well, when you ask that, Dan, I mean, first way to understand this is that the business of making films and the idea of someone who doesn't have Hollywood accolades and big connections to Martin Scorsese, Harrison Ford, and Gwyneth Paltrow, whatever, any of these people, it's just not how the system works, And that said, let's say that it even was on the table. We're talking about millions and millions of dollars, and it would require, just tons of different people in different roles. And this would be independent of, people would say, well, they're dragons, obviously you're not going to be filming on real locations. And so I'm like, well, you might say, okay, we want to get real footage of these things and we're going to overlay the CGI dragons into it. Oh my God, well, that's going to cost them. Yeah. Or someone might say, well, we're going to do it with Unreal or Unity, right? If anybody's not familiar with that, I'll just briefly say they're game engines which slowly over the 90s, right up until this very moment, developed into a massive way of making what originally was just kind of goofy 3D graphics, oh, look, cute little 3D animations, into what people are now going like, I can't believe that's not real. I'm like, right? Not to mention the fact that the Unreal and Unity engines have often been used for some films. People don't really put those pieces together. They just don't really accept it that way. But yeah, some of the game engines, the footage is in movies now or whatever. But coming back to what I'm saying here is, does it cost a lot of money? It's resources and getting the right people involved. So Diamond Dragons began, the first version, as a screenplay. That's what I wrote, just a screenplay. That's what I initially intended to leave them all as. I always intended to do more than one, but I was like, I'll just write the screenplays and I'll go from there and we'll see. I'll just keep moving forward. It's just a passion project that I'm doing for myself because I've been doing all my art for this many decades. When the pandemic hit, suddenly I was like, okay, some people were saying, hey, Matthew, maybe you should try writing a book, and I was like, oh God, I wish people understood what that meant. The difference between writing a screenplay and writing a book is leagues different. It's just, it's just monumentally different. And I knew that it would be a crazy undertaking. So when I decided to approach it, I was very cautious, but I was like, okay, I'll try it for a month. And if I'm like digging in hard and I'm really going for it, and I'm like, wow, this really feels good and has legs, I'll continue. Initially, I thought I was not going to be pleased with it. And as it turns out, I was like, I like where this is going. I'm not perfect, but like, wow. And it opened up all these new ideas that, I'd always had intentions to do Diamond Dragons 2, but then suddenly I was like, wow, I have this great idea for Diamond Dragons 4. I even made a video announcement about it that people can now look back to and they can check and say, wait, was he just making all this up? And he said he had all these planned, and I don't think he's pulling a George Lucas on it and saying he had it planned. I'm like, no, you can go and look and see when I made the announcement that I'm like, I'm pretty sure I got a Diamond Dragons 4 on my hands. And that was back in 2021, when I was barely done with the first one. And then here I am now going on to 5 and 6, and it's possible I'll do 7 and 8, but I'm not sure yet. I don't want to promise anything. And it's not, by the way, I just want to make this clear. It's not, by the way, Dan, like I have hundreds of thousands of viewers and readers. I am powerful. I am George R. Martin and Tolkien. No. And that's totally understandable. I would need a marketing team, like we were talking about before, probably tens of thousands of dollars, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. Hard to say. I don't know how all that works for all the big shot folks out there, like J.K. Rowling and Stephen King, if you will, and Brian Sanderson. Is that his name? I'm not sure if I get that right. Brandon Sanderson. Sometimes my brain goes. I will quickly add, though, I did have the chance to meet, of all people, when in 2007 I was on a panel at a convention called Baycon, and this is when I was doing all my live Star Wars productions, and we can get another time or whenever. But I got to sit on a panel and chat with Alan Dean Foster, who is well known for writing the Star Wars books in general, his own books, and the one that I came into contact with when I was a kid was The Last Starfighter. And that's why I remember when I was opening up my thing, I'm like, I got to get to this panel, all my actors and stuff, because we were doing a production. I was like hurrying, and it was crazy. I got to do this panel. I don't know. They threw me on it. I don't know what's going on. I open the thing. I'm walking over there, and I'm like, this guy, I don't know who this is. Da, 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 da. Alan Dean Foster. Why does that sound familiar? Alan Dean Foster? No, this can't be. Wait, this is a convention. I'm a Star Wars guy, maybe. And then when I got there, I walked in and I'm like, oh my God, you're Alan Dean Foster. And he just looked at me and he says, well, don't get me wrong, but you must be the Jedi, because I was all dressed as a Jedi, and I was like, what gave it away? They're on to me. And he was great. I got to talk to him way before the actual panel had happened. So I got to like sit there and chat and ask him. This is all the way back in 2007. It's way before I even thought the idea of writing Diamond Dragons or anything else like that. But, again, I'd already done some of my own productions. And so I was asking him all sorts of questions like, how do you continue doing it? And obviously it takes discipline. And, he had a wealth of information to say. And I was really blessed with Alan having the candor, instead of just saying, okay, look, shut up, I don't want to talk to you, I got this panel. He just sat there and, oh yeah, tell me more, and what's this, you're doing a production, and oh, this is great, and you read The Last Starfighter when you were a kid, that's awesome, what do you like about him? Oh, it's so cool, like I love the book, and I love the film too, it was so awesome. And so it's production's been a passion of mine, and I find storytelling to be super compelling. It's one of those things, Dan, that like it's what moves us. It's what makes us excited sometimes about going to the movies or popping on them. And these days, everybody's just downloading a movie. Hey, I haven't seen this thing yet. Let's find out. And, pulling up some popcorn with you and your friends or your loved one, whatever, and enjoying, this. And then sometimes it's just a comedy. So you just laugh. Other times it's really heavy drama. And then other times it's like a mixture of both, where at the end, like right at the end of Lord of the Rings, you're kind of just sitting there going, wow, like, damn, man, that's crazy. This entire story has been a whirlwind,
Well, Matthew, since you mentioned your Star Wars productions, let's talk about that a little bit. But before you dive into that, do you have a favorite Star Wars movie?
That's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever been asked that. I think when it comes to films and like stories and all that stuff, picking a favorite is really difficult because it's such a generalistic kind of way of approaching it. Because some people might say, well, don't you want to say, what's your favorite comedy? What's your favorite drama? What's your favorite period piece? What's your favorite sci-fi fantasy? What's your favorite more sci-fi that's more on the edge of reality? Right? For example, like if someone said, oh, let's talk about The Martian, which was, I forgot who the writer was on that. Was that a Peter? Oh man, I don't know his name, the actual writer. And he went through these lengths to be like, hey guys, check my math on this. Am I doing the right science? Do I have the right physics? And this is before, of course, it became a movie and all famous with Matt Damon and the whole, I'm going to science the shit out of this. Great stuff. But the point being is, right, there's all those different nuances, because Star Wars is not really sci-fi. It's a kind of high romantic fantasy, set in space. Just like Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry used to mention, he says, it's really just cowboys in space. you know. Even had wonderful DeForest Kelley, who was one of the kind of Western bad boys back in the day, and then he ended up wanting to play the Doctor instead of some of the more tough guy characters and whatnot. But with Star Wars, I don't know. I would just say I think all of the films that George Lucas created were not only labors of love, but they were the kinds of projects that people often forget. He pushed the industry of so many things. Everybody just usually thinks, oh yeah, graphics, sure, whatever, Matthew. And I'm like, there was the Skywalker sound thing, where he's like, why can't we have more than just kind of garbage sound? Why can't we move it beyond stereo? Why can't we do sort of 3D kind of stereo things where it's more than 2 or 3 speakers, and hence those things were built. And the fact that he founded ILM, like a lot of people kind of forget that. So, I mean, I look at it like with Star Wars, it was less about the films themselves and more about the entire structure that had been set in place. Not to mention the fact that he had just said, I want John Williams on this. I'm not going to have the beep, beep, boop, 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 beep, beep. Like I'm sure anybody doing the sci-fi stuff, they were just going to do electronic keyboards and all the boodly boos and stuff. He's like, I want a cinematic, orchestral powerhouse that probably sounded a little bit like Wagner meets I don't know what, maybe what was that one thing way back in the day? It was just literally called The Planets. John Williams took a lot of liberties with that in order to inspire the music. You'll have to look that up sometime. I can't remember the exact original composer, but this thing was just literally called The Planets, and it was the orchestral piece was way back in like the 30s or 40s, something. And so I think George Lucas said, hey, Johnny, have a listen to all these things for some inspiration on what do you want to do with the Star Wars score and whatnot. And so yeah, just, on production levels, I mean, I think that they have changed the face of cinema. And so that's what makes it a favorite of mine,
Now, when you were doing the productions, like, were you like just like acting out scenes from a movie, or what
no,
exactly
so
were you doing?
the first production that I decided to put together was my own project with my own characters and my own kind of storytelling. Granted, it was sort of an experimental thing. The show was really only 5 minutes long, so it was only a piece that could be then thrown into like in between other things, or we could do the show and then do workshops at these places. It's hard to explain, but I called it Balance of Power, and it really was just a powerhouse, a tour de force, if you will, of just some folks come on stage, something dramatic happens, the bad guy comes out, then more folks come on, and then suddenly 10 people are fighting, and one of the good guys gets killed, and the bad guy is this. And it's just all like super quick, dramatic structure in 5 minutes. And we just quickly establish, the young, guy who thinks he can take on the big bad guy and it doesn't work out. The Jedi Master who's like, you got to chill out and control your emotions kind of thing. And then the big evil guy, which, I loved creating his name. He was Darth Necrolysis, so just this name, you're like, oh God, Necrolysis? What the hell? I mean, it sounds like he's, some evil conjuration of demons and death. So great. But yeah, most of it was just the experiment where I was like, I want to see if I can bring a bunch of strangers together who were just excited about not only staged combat live, but they want to wield some sabers that actually work on stage. And part of some of the reason I think that it became popular back in the day, people can go back and look at the video, and now of course it's meaningless, but it was when YouTube was brand new, very brand new, 2005 and 6, and there really wasn't much in the way of bright lightsaber props that could be collided without just turning into a million pieces, and whatnot, or just, being terrible. And so we were sort of at the cusp of those kinds of things. I put the performance out there, and I go to bed, and I don't know, a week went by, I go back, and I don't know, I didn't know anything about it. I'm like, YouTube, what is this? One of my cast members had suggested, and I said, sure, whatever, I'll throw it up. I don't know what this is. I have no idea. I'm doing other things, teaching my fencing classes, come back to the video, and it's like, 32,000 views. And remember, this is only like in a week now. Today, this is meaningless. But back then I was like, what the hell is going on? And I had like all these little, this is cool, and what about this, and how did you do that? And I'm like, what the hell? Like, what is happening here? I didn't know this was going to happen. So it sort of, kind of snowballed from there. I'd always intended to make another one. I wanted to have Balance of Power 2, of course, and then 3. And so I just sort of, went down that rabbit hole. I eventually did my own reenactments of the Empire Strikes Back fight scene, which is the first in the world, as far as I know, in terms of the way that I did it, which is everything was redone. We redid the music, we redid all the sound effects, I did all the vocals, like Luke, Yoda, Vader, and the Emperor. And the choreography, all this kind of stuff. We did live effects on stage, gassing Vader in the face, calling the saber back, my hand being chopped off, or whatever, Luke's hand being chopped off. We did this all real time. And in the ways that I did it, to this day, I've not seen it accomplished in these ways. But it's not popular. No one would really know about it. But we did this in 2014, and it's available on YouTube for people to go and see. So there's that. And then I did a version of the A New Hope fight. And in that case, I was Vader, of all things. And I'm not a tall person, so I had to kind of do some extremely sneaky cheats to make myself about, I want to say 6'2", 6'3", something like that. Someone once said that they kind of measured me, and they're like, yeah, I mean, I'm about this, and you're standing next to me as Vader and this. And I was like, really? I'm that tall? And they're like, yeah. So that was a thing. And I performed that with a fellow named Christopher Villa, who was a swordsman of the stage and whatnot, and he happened to be the same age of Alec Guinness that Alec Guinness was when Alec Guinness originally filmed as Obi-Wan Kenobi. So that was just kind of a fun thing where I'm like, you're the exact same age that he was at the time, and he's like, yeah, it just so happens. So that's a cool point of it. And he even kind of looked a little bit like Alec Guinness, so that was always fun. And then finally, the final performance that I did is somewhere around, I want to say 2016, 2017, something like that, was Kylo versus Rey, and that was pretty difficult. Let me tell you that. That was a tough one. Wielding that crossguard saber that I built, very heavy, with one hand mostly too. I mean, it just wreaks havoc on the wrist. But in the mask, it's tough to see through, tough to breathe in. Lots of tricks to do. I even did real-time voice changing on both the Vader and the Kylo thing. So that was fun. People really love that, right? When they'd walk up, they want to take a picture, and then I would just be like, as Vader, I'd be like, you don't know the power of the dark side. And that, with the mechanical real-time thing, they were like, okay, then what the hell is this? So it's a lot of fun, but I mean, yeah, it's a lot of work too, physically, just draining. You had to be lots of endurance. You had to be strong to do that kind of stuff. And I'm too old for that kind of stuff. I don't want to quote the Alec Guinness thing, I'm getting too old for this, Luke,
Where did you learn to do fight choreography?
That's a really good question too. Mostly self-taught, I had to do all the work myself, read the books, look into, okay, this technique, that way of doing things, etc., and draw off my fencing experience, and also that I had done a lot of martial arts. Now, that said, there's a huge sort of difference, if you will, between real-time fencing and then doing fight choreography. And so the irony is, doing fencing, you're the best way to explain it to you in the quickest way, but this is, of course, just scratching the surface, the tip of the iceberg, if you will, is real-time fencing. I don't want you to know what I'm going to do to you, Dan, right? I don't want you to predict where my action is going. Otherwise, you'd try to stop it, or you would be able to stop it in time. Whereas with stage combat, I kind of want you to see it coming so that we're in tune and, we block here, we do this. A lot of fight choreography is a little bit more akin to doing a choreographed, that's why I call it fight choreography, dance, but not really a dance, right? You still need to sell the actions. Like, I'm trying to punch Dan in the face, so we have to make it look good. For film, there's a lot of interesting cheats that you can do that you cannot do in live theater for obvious reasons. With film, obviously, Dan, we can say, okay, Dan, the next thing, we're only going to do 5 moves. It's going to be this, ha, ba, ba, boo, ba, or whatever. Cut. We just do it 6 times, make sure it looks good. Ready, action. Ba, 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 boom. Okay, cut. Try again, set again. Can you more with this, with the punch? It's not really reading. You need to, okay, ready, action, up, 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 boom. Then when you get what you want, you can move on, is a one way to approach it. For live theater, you can't do that, right? For live theater, you got to go from A to Z, and you got to do it right as best as you can. And even if you make a few mistakes, you better pick it up, right? You can't stop in the middle of a fencing performance of, Cyrano de Bergerac or The Princess Bride or whatever, and just stop doing your work. You're like, you got to go on. So you try to get 99.9 whatever percent perfect in rehearsal, so that when you perform, you're just there. And again, going back to film, whereas with film, sometimes you'll do long shots, I should say not long shots, long takes, if you will. But if anybody screws up, you can just say, okay, let's go. You want to go again? Can you guys go again? Yeah, sure, let's do it. And the only thing that will ever cut into that for film would be budget and time constraints. Like if you've shot this, you do so many takes and you're like, okay, guys, look, like that's good enough. We got it. We got what we need. We'll get it in the edit. We'll get it in post, as often it was. We will say so. Yeah, the fight choreography experience came from a myriad of places, but I did really have to do a lot of like how I do my own way. Drawing on what I've learned from this, martial arts, fencing, actual staged combat techniques from this type of style and this style. So just to be clear, Dan, there's not one, it's not like there's only one way to do it. Just like, as you can imagine, the way that Sharon Stone approached her acting was probably quite different from the way Jim Carrey approached his acting. And I'm not trying to say one is worse, better, this, that. It's just the point is, you like, there's just different styles, different people, different technique, different way to bring your emotions out. I will add this though, Jackie Chan was a huge inspiration for how to do it right, for film, especially for film. He's definitely, if someone were to ask me, who should you look at, what production should you look at to learn from their techniques, go look up Golden Dragon Pictures, look up Jackie Chan's, like, My Style, My Way, his techniques. There's a series of videos where they go into it in depth, and it's like beautiful when you really look at it and you see how he explains why he's like, sometimes he'll say this, Dan, he says sometimes American directors don't know how to edit fights. They don't know how. And he says sometimes even their fight choreographers, they don't know how to do it. And then they have their actors, they're putting them in, they don't know how to fight. He says you can see all of this. He says, so like, it's important, right? I have my camera this way. I don't move the camera that often. I'm setting up the next shot with this stuff. There's the thing in the background will be important in the next shot. Why? Because they're going to subconsciously see that, the audience. And also, how come I edit in this very, very non-contiguous way sometimes? He says, because we have to let the audience's eyes catch up. Anyway, I'm saying a lot with that, but right, there's a rabbit hole to go down. Like, some people wonder, well, how come Jackie Chan stuff is so wonderful? You don't know the magic until you really look closely and go, oh, so that's what's missing from all these other fight scenes where I feel like they could be great, but they weren't. They looked terrible. Why did they look terrible? Because they don't know what they're doing.
In a similar vein to that, do you have like an all-time favorite fight scene in a movie?
Well, there's so many, but again, going back to the, like, what's your favorite Star Wars movie? Like, for example, someone could say, what's your favorite kind of sword piece, period? Or do you want it fantasy? Or what is a gunfighting and action and this, and or martial arts? How about The Matrix? Because it's so cool and they got to do all this wonderful stuff from, like, Yuen Woo-ping. And just on that note, I will say, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. I may never have been over all these decades, but Yuen Woo-ping is well known for choreographing Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, The Matrix, and just all sorts of beautiful productions. I'm pretty sure he even had something to do with, if not a lot to do with, the work in, what was it, like, the original Drunken Master, which was also with Jackie Chan and, I'm forgetting the other guy's name. He was a legend in martial arts who was alongside him in that movie. The original Drunken Master, not Drunken Master 2. But anyway, the point being is there are so many. But I guess I will say this is, from a storytelling point of view, and like the overarching, like, does it all gel together? There's so many films and they're beautiful films. Highlander was great. The Star Wars original, by the way, I really do like the original fight. I know a lot of people say it's all so slow and they seem like old men. It was still a really good fight scene. And The Empire Strikes Back, beautiful work. Return of the Jedi, also pretty darn cool. But Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was, I would say, one of the most definitive ways of using the fight choreography to really emphasize and cradle the storytelling. Um, I know that a lot of us are probably familiar with it. For those who aren't, they should really go see the film. And then if they watch some of the fight scenes over and over, not just the one with Michelle Yeoh and Zhang Ziyi, where these two, ladies are, everybody will know Michelle Yeoh from Everything Everywhere All at Once, and also she was in a Bond film alongside Pierce Brosnan. I forget which one it was called. But anyway, there's some really amazing sequences in there. And to just kind of put the button on this for that, Dan, is, see, fight choreography to me, and I would argue that most of the fight choreographers would probably agree with me on this, is that it's there to help emphasize the storytelling and to show the characters. So, like, why is it that Vader only uses one hand in this particular section of the fight between him and Luke? Why doesn't he use two the whole time? Why does he switch to two later and then start using this big kind of raging, huge, out of control strikes? Why was it, some people might just, oh yeah, it looks cool on screen. I'm like, it's not a bit of it just like that. Not if the choreography is really good. Bob Anderson knew what he was doing. Yuan Wuping knows what he's doing, and Jackie Chan knows what he's doing, with why is this guy's using a lot of punches, not very much kicks. This guy's using a lot of kicks, but not very much punches. Or this guy's staying back and being like, you come, you attack me first. So they're always on defense for the most part. Obviously throwing a punch and a kick every now and again, but you go like, this scene's really interesting. This guy never initiates, never, the whole scene. And you won't notice that in some scenes. You will not notice that. You will think, oh, I could have sworn that person was the aggressor the whole time. Like, if you look carefully, they never initiate. They only reply to the other person, So you go, oh, that's so interesting. Or just, certain things are like, they never attack above the waist. And you're like, that's so weird. I didn't notice that. It's like, right? All of his actions are attacking their legs, almost like they're holding back and they don't want to do any damage to like the head or the face. For what the hell's going on with this fight scene? So you go, oh, it's an echo of the characters or whatever, So like I would say Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but it's pretty tough. I mean, there is stuff from the Shaw Brothers going all the way back to what was it? Five Elements, I think it was called. Crazy stuff. The Shaw Brothers were the truth. Like some crazy choreography. Have you ever heard of these guys? This is way back in the day, like 60s, 70s.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. Some of my favorite movies were the Shaw Brothers. Yeah.
Right? It's like, that's cool. It's crazy. I mean, yes, some people might say this is ridiculous. They're jumping from trees and no. I'm like, I know, but the Chinese martial arts stars are like not our American superheroes. They fly, they punch, they dun dun dun. They can use energy moves. I'm like, it's no different than Superman, blowing, this, or throwing a plastic S at people or whatever in whatever movie that was. The hell was that all about? But I mean, so like I look at it like, look, if you go into kind of the Shaw Brothers style fight movies, thinking you're going to see realism, I'm like, okay, you should check out at the door, man. Like, what the hell are you doing? That's like watching Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, going, they're jumping through the trees and on roofs. This is so stupid. I'm like, oh yeah, because the rest of the film made a whole lot of sense when they have the green destiny sword. You're like, yeah, okay, bro. Like, come on, like, or with the lightsabers. Like, it's so unrealistic that Luke would do this. And you're like, oh yeah, when they're having talking Wookiees and they go, what's that, R2? What do you say? C-3PO's here? And you're like, since when do you understand boop, boop, beep, beep, blah, 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 blah? I'm like, what are you talking about? There's no way you would know his language. You just bought that droid. How do you know that? So yeah, if you apply realism to a lot of these things, it's ridiculous. And what people often miss is the beauty of going like, how did they do that? That was so cool. He jumps up here, he does this thing, they throw that giant thing, and he just punches it and explodes into kindling. You're like, it looks so cool. How did they do that? You're like, yeah, it probably took a lot of work because that was back in the day. There wasn't any CGI. They had to do it with strings and dust and kindling and, magic, real movie magic kind of stuff. Whereas now it's almost unappreciated, I should say, because now, if we want to say, let's make Dan look like a martial arts star, we could probably do it. And they're like, is he? They're like, no, but we can CGI the hell out of it. And you're like, oh, that's okay. But when you go back and you say, yo, these guys had to do it. If you had to fall from a long distance, they just show it. Maybe there's a pad on the floor, maybe there isn't. You just got to be tough. Handle that. If you can't do it, then they say, okay, get out of here. We get a new stunt guy. Come here, you fall. Jackie Chan used to say that too. He says, if you got injured, you're gone. They will take the next guy. And it's like, whoa, that's hardcore.
Matthew, this might be a difficult question to answer, but through everything you've done, do you have any accomplishments that stand out that you're especially proud of?
Well, that's a good question, but again, pretty generalized. I guess this would be a good way for me to transition to say, no one has really asked me about my daughter and her involvement with the Diamond Dragon series. And so there's a big shout out to my daughter, Kate, which I have read these books now to her, ever since she was young. And now, of course, she's getting older. When I first started reading these books to her, they're way beyond her capacity. So I was just reading it to her to, make her laugh and do the voices of the characters and all that kind of stuff and try to steamroll her over some of the harder moments, because there's it's pretty dramatic. Diamond Dragons 1 is pretty, I often tell people there are a lot of Boromirs in Diamond Dragons 1. Like there's more than one, so you're like, oh man, wow. But I put some of her artwork at the back of all of the books, and it's beautiful to see her own growth as a young artist, which, I didn't know that she was going to do this, right? No, but not everybody grows up in different ways, but she did. She wanted to draw, so she did a lot of drawing. She likes to write. She likes to, draw all sorts of different characters. She loves cats and dogs and animals and stuff. She'll draw unicorns and certain times she'll say, Daddy, I'll draw a picture of Elliot, or something like, oh, that'd be great. I would love that. Go ahead. So, and she's young, so sometimes she does, and sometimes she forgets, and sometimes she doesn't, or whatever. But I always put something that she's done. And one time I was particularly proud that she did the days of the week, and let me explain that. The days of the week, of course, we know them: Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. I changed them slightly for the dragon story so that, one, you would understand what day it was when they mention it, but I made the days just enough different so you're like, oh, that's kind of clever. They have Sun's Day and Moon's Day, Truth's Day and Wind's Day, like Thorn's Day, and then Fire's Day, and then finally Star's Day. And it's like, oh, that's pretty clever. And they also have like their special kind of days where one becomes Song's Day, and there's one character in particular, he's like a bard, a minstrel. So he mentions at one point, oh, today is Song's Day. And Elliot's like, what? There's no such day. And he says, I beg your pardon, young idiot. You know that there's all these special days and da-da-da-da. He's like, yeah, but I've never heard of this one. He's like, yeah, we don't celebrate it that often, and we should. So there's these kind of things. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but then he teaches one of the other characters. This character teaches him about some of the days. And then later, Elliot has his kind of take on what the days of the week mean, for the storytelling. But anyway, so, I'm proud that in addition to just being a father, which, let's be honest, almost anyone can pull that off, is just doing my best to have my daughter grow up as an intelligent, inquisitive, and artistic human being. And I'm doing my best with that, and I think it's working. And I'm just also glad to see that this has been happening. Little bits of records will be there with my books. I mean, I can't wait at the end of Diamond Dragon 6. What will I see or will there be more of her artwork that will not just be at the back of the book? I don't know. We'll find out, but it is that kind of chronicle of being able to see, well, when she was this age, it was this, and then a year goes by, and then a year goes by. Because that's pretty much what I do. Diamond Dragons 1 was 2021. DD2, 2022, and so forth. And again, I might go as far as Diamond Dragons 8. We'll see. I don't want to, again, promise anything, but it's like I'd always had intentions to do at least 4. And then once I got all 4 done, I was like, okay, I think I can do this 5 and 6. I hope I can pull this off. These are going to be more complicated, and they are. But I'm proud to say, as of this moment, as of the time of this recording, I'm about 40,000 words, and I want to say 30 illustrations, something like that, into DD. What was I going to say? DD5? Yeah, DD5. Sorry, I lost my brain. And there's some work done on DD6, but I always keep that sort of in the background in my other files, and I don't really attack it, But I'm always kind of working on these projects one by one, and it's just all about the discipline and consistency, Dan. So there's a lot of projects I've done over the years, and I'm proud of a lot of them. But yeah, I'm glad that my daughter is also learning from this and growing as an artist herself.
Yeah, that's very cool. Matthew, do you have anything on the horizon after Diamond Dragons, like any projects that you'd like to try out?
I'm not really sure at this point. I feel like that part of my future is a mystery, but I am getting older. I might not look it to some people, but I'm quite a bit older than I look. And, there's something I will at least add, and it might feel a little heavy to some people, but they can take it as what they want. The taglines to each of the book have a lot of wisdom to share. And they each have sort of a theme. The theme of Diamond Dragons 1, or at least one of many, but the primary theme is time. And the tagline is, "Time is the only resource for which no creature may bargain." Right? You can't buy it. You can't sell it. You can't trade for more of it. You can't ask for it from your buddies and this kind of stuff. You can only do with it what you have. And too many people oftentimes will say, "Oh, I'll do this next week," or "One day I'll quit drinking, smoking. One day I'll cut off those people who are really negative in my life. One day I'll, tomorrow. And I'm like, it's a really dangerous way of going about things, don't you think? So in addition to me doing all of this work, it's just trying to make people aware, Time is the only resource. I think the second one is wisdom is earned. There's more to it, but I just kind of give you the pieces. Third one is courage is tempered. You'd have to find out by what. What is it tempered by? And then the fourth one is reflection is key. So it's very interesting. Time, wisdom, courage, reflection. What the hell could 5 and 6 be? What could they be? I just don't know. And so, these are things that, as the Bard once said, literally, must give us pause. Things for people to think about. The storytelling that I've placed into Diamond Dragons 1 through 4, and will also be there for 5 and 6, is I feel like they should give people much pause, much in the way that like Lord of the Rings does. There's these kind of what we call thematic underpinnings, right, if you will, themes that resonate. And it's like, why is it that these works stay popular and other things fade into the void, or so to speak? You know what I mean? Why does Star Wars stick around? At least the original ones. Why is it that the original Matrix trilogy hit so hard and then kind of stuck around for quite a while, and so on and so forth? Storytelling is what I'm about, Dan. And by doing this series, I feel like I can leave behind a legacy that when and if people really tackle it and they get involved in it, they'll be overwhelmed with all of the hidden secrets.
Absolutely. Well, Matthew, this hour has flown by, and I just want to say thank you very much for coming on. And once again, that website is Diamond Dragons. That's Diamond-Dragons. So I definitely recommend people check that out. And Matthew Carauddo, thanks again so much. I appreciate you coming on today.
Well, thanks, Daniel. It's been a pleasure.
I'm definitely looking forward to checking out the books too. I think it sounds pretty interesting. Matthew, thanks again, and thanks to all the listeners out there. If you'd like to learn more about my podcast, you can find me on YouTube, Blue Sky, Facebook, or Instagram, and I will see you guys next time. Take care, everybody.